I would love to hear from us and have us have a conversation about what it means to love God with her mind, with our minds. What do you guys have thoughts about that?
I think it's interesting to think about, we know what it means to love God with our heart, I feel like, but love God with your mind. I mean, is opening up a textbook and, I don't know, doing your calculus, is that something that you can do? I feel like, I'm in a church where a lot of people do love God with their mind. They're doing incredible research. They're doing all kinds of things, all kind of intellectual endeavors where they show me that, there's not this kind of sacred secular divide, I guess. It's so easy to think of ourselves like, we love God with our heart when we worship him and we raise our hands in worship and we're at church, but is loving God, like my friend who's a breast cancer researcher, is that a way to love God as well? And I think it is. I just don't think we always have those categories.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Jasmine?
Yeah, I think as you were talking, I was just thinking of, I am teaching literature this year, and we're learning about the Greeks, learning about the ancient Greeks and reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. And it's a Christian school, so we're going to have all these conversations of, is it okay to read Greek mythology? Is it okay to read secular things? And is that loving God with your mind? And I think that it is, because it's learning more about the world that he made, learning more about the cultures that he made, and he put our minds inside of us. He put this world inside of us, and being created in his image, we kind of were made to search and to seek and to know and to understand, and I think that can be an act of worship, definitely.
Yeah, I also think it's really important from my perspective to actually do that as a testimony and as a witness to other people who aren't Christians. Yes. Because quite often the mind, almost you can appeal to a public truth about it, but when you only focus on loving God with your heart and your emotions, it quickly becomes, that's my private truth, this is my story. But if you can appeal to something that is actually true in the world, and if we believe all truth is God's truth, then we can actually have a strong witness to our neighbors to say, well, you see this, and I've learned this. Isn't that beautiful? Well, let me tell you who created that. Yeah. And so I think there's like the work that your friend is doing with the breast cancer research. She's pointing to things that are, all truth is God's truth, and it compels people to think about, well, who is that God? What does that mean?
I think it's surprising too for people that are outside of the faith, people who are outside of church. I think a lot of times they have this kind of impression of, religious people sort of not really being very intellectually sharp.
Religion is the opium of the people.
Right, exactly. Like it's just sort of an emotional crutch, and certainly like you can't be intellectual or smart or care about the life of the mind and also believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and so I think it sort of blows apart their categories when you demonstrate that you actually have curiosity about the world, and I think that's actually I think a spiritual practice is just to be curious about the world, because if God created everything, it's a way to worship him, is just to ask good questions and wanting to know how things work and what history, what important things happened in history. I mean, those things are ways that we worship him because he was in all of those things and is in all of those things.
One of my friends, when he was in college at an Ivy League college in the Northeast, he started a Christian student thought journal. And he started it because his roommate in college said to him, "You mean Christians think?" And so he thought, well, maybe we should actually start a thought journal where we're engaging and trying to create commonplace conversations about a Christian's approach to different things. And so now it's been going on for years, and it's still at the school, and so it creates great conversations. I would love to talk about why you think, is there something unique about being a woman loving God with her mind? Is there maybe a cultural importance of that in a unique way? Or do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think that there can be kind of a stigma to women loving God with their minds at times. We are supposed to love him in a different way from the men around us. Our focus is supposed to be different. But honestly, when it comes down to it, I think that we're just people. We're people who are called to love God with all our hearts, our souls, and our mind, both women and men.
That's right.
And while we may do that in different contexts at times, it doesn't change the heart of the matter, which is the loving, the searching, the seeking, which can take place male or female.
I feel like there are a lot of women who want to kind of offer this corrective, like biblical teachers, I've heard this, like women, you're overly emotional, you're supposed to love God with your mind, you need to become more rational, and it's almost this idea that sometimes we can overvalue the mind. We can say that the emotions are fallen and the mind isn't. And where we really have to say that all of our faculties are fallen and all of our faculties are capable of being redeemed, you know. So loving God with my emotions, like there's something scary about that. And there's actually something scary about loving God with my mind too, because it's not as if just because I love God with my mind, I'm going to get everything right, you know, and that's what we have post-enlightenment. And I think we need to recover a really holistic view of the human person. And that's why we have Deuteronomy, right? That says, love God with all of who you are, every part of your being.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we have not only Deuteronomy, but also you said post-enlightenment. Definitely in the first century, you had a whole group of people that were loving God according to the law and the mind, and yet they were called whitewashed tombs. Yes. So there was a lack of that passion. Yes. So I think even though we are called to love God with our mind, which is the beautiful and the good thing, there's a danger in overemphasizing the mind and forgetting that when the scriptures talk about the heart, it's actually much more inclusive than the emotions.
Yes.
It's wisdom, it's the emotions, it's the mind, it's the whole of who you are.
Yes.
And that's actually it's a much better framework for thinking about loving the Lord with your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Our pastor was just preaching on 1 Corinthians 13, and just like this really simple reminder, like you can have all the knowledge in the world, you can understand all the mysteries of creation, but if you have not love, you know, what are we? And it's just that reminder too. I think we're in a culture that, I mean, there are a lot of certain contexts that really prize the life of the mind, prize kind of intellectual acuity and, you know, drive and stuff. And just that reminder that, you know, as Christians, we want to say that the most important skill that we could ever develop and shape and pursue is our ability to love. And I think knowledge is a part of that. I think the life of the mind is a part of that, but I don't think it's the whole of that, right?
Well, thanks, you guys. That was a great conversation.